It's a form of schizophrenia. If you were moving towards someone with aggression, but the only way you saw reality is that they were moving to you with aggression. Think about that. And that, what I call schizophrenia, exists within the nominal range of the average social group amongst white people. These types of discordant and dominant realities are finding some useful kind of measured oppression over other people every day. Someone who gets in your face and says, hey, you're getting in your face. Someone who throws poop at you and says, you're a poo-poo head. You made me that way, didn't you? They put a dress on you and call you a girl. They fling mud on you and say you're muddy. They cast you into a role. They force you. Paralysis, numbness, shock. I had a redneck man pretend that he was going to hit me with his car and then just laugh. He would always say and do vaguely humiliating things to me. We lived in the building. And then act like it was nothing. He always wanted to control my body. If I was vulnerable, he wanted me to hug him. He wanted me to come into his space. He wanted to ask me, pester me. He never accepted my right to be. He never told me that he wasn't a harmful person ever. And I saw like this unwholesome light in his eyes. That he couldn't get me to submit to him. And the more I was able to not let him get me to submit to him, the more interested in me he became. And then suddenly I just stopped seeing him. And he's like, goodbye. He was a predator. He doesn't think that, but he is. They don't make you feel good about yourself. You don't feel safe around them. And it's not like you have to make it your business to get in their face, but you're just polite, passive, keep on walking. And because of that, because of how you steel yourself at all, that it resumes in your power to feel the way you feel about another person, right? It arouses them even more. They feel like the hunt is on. They project onto you things they don't want to accept about themselves. You might see some people who are really passive, women sometimes who are way too passive. You think, why wouldn't someone prey on them? They're basically making themselves prey, just the way they approach life. I have, in some sense, been accused of that. To be violated is to be accused of that. No doubt that anyone who looks sufficiently prey-like has been found to be worthy prey of someone probably they're related to. Who are surprised, shocked even, violated in some of their higher sense of what humans should be if they're sufficiently thankful or loving, that you haven't taken it as a thorough and as an education in life as your loving mother or father would ever have wanted you to have, or uncle or auntie. A lot of violence is a love and an authority in the reality of love, and the reality of what you should consider loving. When someone has to try to manipulate you or force you to believe something is loving, do you think it's loving? Okay. If you're talking to your child and they're crying, do you think they're happy? If you're yelling at them and they're crying, do you think they're enjoying it? Do you think your message is coming across? And there are a lot of white parents who need to know that. If you're yelling at your child, you're not communicating anything, right? You understand that. If you're yelling at your child, I heard it today when I was walking here. I didn't try not to judge him. And this man and his children couldn't hear him because when he talks to them, he raises his voice all the time. You can see that. That's what he does. And so they don't listen. What's happening is they're losing instruction time. They're losing the ability to take instruction from their own father, right? Or they've lost it by some means. And so he's now resorted to, or he never began anywhere better than simply yelling at them, raising his voice as if more authority, more male testosterone is going to get them to understand better. do this, move away. Why are you doing that? Right? He's not talking to them like people or anything that you would expect an adult to do for another adult. He thinks that because they're children, he can talk to them in a way that you wouldn't talk to a person you respected in the adult world. And that's to make them into adults. Think about that. How are you going to make someone an adult, treating someone worse than you would treat an adult? Because you can get away with it. Right? Who does that? Except a what? A sexual predator or a pedophile. And it isn't done like a pedophile does things in the name of love. You know, your child is going to be better off in the world if you yell at them. And it's not yelling, you're just being their mom and dad. That's what mom and dads do. Now, there are a lot of white people who need to know this. They don't know this. Just look around you. A lot of white people, men and women, don't know that yelling is not an effective way of communicating to a child at all. You're turning off all the parts of their brain that is like stalking. Someone who's aggressive to you, someone who's oppressive, sadistic, for any reason, even if they've just been so convinced that they should be, right, is going to omit an adequate provision for your voice and your own safety. And yelling at someone, and yelling at a child's brain, is the best way to do that. It's the next best thing to hitting them in the head, right, with your hand. You're just abusing them. But in white culture, it's accepted. How do you expect anyone who's an adult to understand the language you're speaking if you yell at them all the time? And you show frustration that they don't seem to understand what you're saying and do what you tell them to do. You know, I can understand if a bus was coming. Get out of the way of the bus, right? But it's like, put your hands on the table. Do this. Don't stand there. Why are you doing that? It's going to mean nothing. You're losing hundreds, and in Turtle Island, millions of hours of time to bond with your child. Because if you can't communicate with your son and daughter properly, guess what? As far as their brain is concerned, they become an orphan. They become wards of the state. They become emotional outlaws. They'll have to figure out a big chunk of life by themselves, along with their other friends, all of whom are figuring out the same thing. And what happens when children combine forces to figure out how to communicate when their parents are yelling at them? Probably not a good idea. Or yelling around them, or yelling at the television. Or drinking, all lit up by alcohol. There are men and women who are mothers and fathers who should go for a walk every day. Have your coffee, your weed, and just get it out of your system. Then come home, right? Measure your steps carefully so you can come home, have some energy left, and take care of business. Feel satisfied that there's something out here you can find that your family needs, like your own peace of mind. No human family lives and works, but that they do war with something that does war with them, that first declares war on them. Call it God, the banking system, the devil, or just the unfortunate evils to which some kinds of human have resorted for so long that we've learned to live with them. The sick, the poor, the professional psychopath, you name it. Royalty, mass media. But that's what I like most about media. Analyzing it. Because it is kind of a tip of the sword in controlling people. And it's tough not to like. It's tough not to be disarmed by. From pictures of kittens to incredibly well-written psychodramas. Scintillating lights, editing, fashion, smiles, big people, big names, big things. Bright, dazzling, worldly, rich, famous, you name it. A person who can put on makeup and a costume, go on various stages in front of cameras, and make the world like them, well, that's the perfect job for a professional psychopath. Professional, narcissistic, sociopath, everything. That's the best thing in the world for them. If you wanted to collect all of them, that's all you'd have to do is create the movie industry. You could lure them all to the same fucking audition. You know, want to rule the world? Oh, sure. Perfect. I liked life as a child before there was such a thing as favorite television shows. The only show I ever watched as a child, going into the 90s, that picked up on sort of mass media levels was the show called Friends. It's the only thing that I ever really liked that much that came out into the culture of even the 2020s. You know, such a monumental sort of following, I guess. Such a pleasant group of humans. Such pleasant lives. Such funny, loving, friendly lives. Work, home, place where fun times were always to be had. Sexual hijinks. You know, but also kind of like somewhat real life, sobering sort of things, but nothing too serious. Jokes about your mother committing suicide by putting her head in the oven. Jokes about desecrating native burial ground with toxic waste dumps. Jokes like that, right? Which you think in America at that time would be considered impossible to get on broadcast TV, but made it on. And we laughed and we went on. They did their job and we did ours. And but I always took note of such things. Since with these shows and in this era, you started getting digital video, and so you started getting special features, and then slowly, you know, people buying TV shows to watch at home, and getting to watch and rewatch now. So it's probably no coincidence that some of the first big purchases of